In this review, I'll be going over the detail of the figure, including any accessories that come with the figure, the posability of the figure, the transformation in alt mode, as well as looking at the overall value the figure has depending on what price point is being asked of the consumer. Each segment will be ranked out of 10, with a final segment for the overall scoring out of 50. Timestamps will be down in the description for anyone wanting to jump around to a specific segment. Now, without further ado, let's jump into the review. Hello and welcome to a brand new review. Today we'll be taking a look at the Transformers Studio Series 86 Bumblebee. This is part of the Transformers the Movie wave and is a little bit of an older figure, I will say. I did want to look at the Megatron figure that we just got, but as I'm a little under the weather, I wanted to kind of leave that for maybe next week. And this week we'll look at Bumblebee. And maybe we can build up to something like Optimus Prime, which would be pretty cool. But first off, this is in the older style Studio Series box. It doesn't have that brand new post Age of the Primes box. It's the, the one that's got the open box. You can actually touch the figure and stuff, which depending on your taste and stuff, whether you like it or not, it is something that happened. Me personally, it is a little weird having to touch the figure and kind of maybe scuff it up a bit, but that is a feature of this box. Moving on to the other side here, the back of the box is the product shots. This is obviously a smaller Bumblebee, and I'm actually really kind of excited to see that in hand and compare him to some other Deluxes. And I'm curious how small he actually is. It looks like he does come with one accessory, that being his blaster, and this is back when we were actually getting the backdrops for the Studio Series. So you actually can see what that looks like with the figure. So overall, let's jump right in. Before we begin the review, I want to say I knew Bumblebee was going to be small, but I didn't realize how small he actually is in hand. And I'm really excited to kind of showcase that between the different comparisons we'll do. Also here we have the stand. I just want to get this quickly out of the way before we jump right into the figure. This obviously isn't something we get nowadays with the more modern post Age of the Primes Studio Series figures. Whether you think that's a good thing or not, this does add extra value to what you're getting. Now for me personally, I don't use these stands, but again, it is extra value, so you do have a point if you do use it and kind of miss it. Now for this one specifically, this is of the kind of later half of the movie where you're actually inside Unicron. So I do kind of like the twisting kind of piping there and the little details you have in the different paneling. So that looks pretty cool. As well, you have the Transformers the Movie logo, which looks really awesome there. And then this Transformers and the Studio Series logos on either side. This is obviously for the 86 movie, so you got the big 86 there. So other than that, it's just kind of a piece of cardboard. Something I'll probably throw away, but it is nice that you get the choice to either use it or not, versus nowadays where you don't even get that choice. So now let's get to the figure. So here's the figure, and I want to jump into comparisons right away just to kind of showcase how tiny this figure actually is. So now this is a deluxe figure, as we know. I'm going to put next a post. This is Age of the Primes Air Raid here. He is also a deluxe figure, and you can see there is quite the kind of height difference and kind of bulkiness going on right here between even like two different deluxes. And this is like a more recent deluxe versus this. Now obviously Bumblebee in the G1 is a little bit smaller, so it is kind of cool to see that translated even in between like the same class of deluxe. Next I'll show over the Voyager class, with that being from the same movie. This is the Voyager class scrapper that we looked at last week. Here you can see again big difference as we get into that bigger kind of price point and the bigger class with Voyager. And then finally I want to look at the leader class, that being with Megatronus. And I'll just bring this up a little bit. You can already kind of see that he just absolutely towers over poor Bumblebee here. You could probably crush him, which would be pretty cool. But even his weapon like completely just towers over him. So that is really cool to see, like a really small deluxe. Now we'll kind of see whether that or not that is translated the the size is translated into better sort of design or detail, or even weapon accessories or transformation. We'll see if that translation is kind of worth it. So with some comparisons out of the way, let's look into detail. So he is very small, as we've already found out, but what about the actual detail of the figure and posability? First up, detail. So he does come with one accessory, which there is weapon storage here on the back. We'll jump into that in just a second. We'll look at the actual figure. So with the figure in hand, there's a lot of different paint details. I do want to draw attention right away to the kind of chest area, and this will be a problem still in the vehicle mode, obviously. But the chest area here is actually a different paint color to what the body is kind of made into. So the yellow is very much different, and you can kind of see that this is a little more kind of brighter almost versus more of a matte yellow. And then even noticeable between this and then the kind of crotch piece here. So for anything that's right there, it is kind of noticeable. Down at the feet there, it's a little more kind of metallic is the best way. It's glossy, I guess is the best way to put that. So comparing like the matte versus the glossy versus like this kind of almost mustard yellow compared to like the more subtle yellow is a little kind of off-putting. Another thing I do want to mention, it might just be for my copy, and then like I said, this is kind of a figure that you can open and touch in the actual store, but there is a kind of little bit of black going on the figure on the head, as well here on the back tail light. There's like this little dot here that's like a paint scuff. So for my copy, it is a little scuffed up. Now, if that's for every figure, I don't, this could just be for my copy, but something to look out for. So we'll start with the head sculpt and move our way down. Here we have a very beautiful head sculpt for Bumblebee. You get the nice yellow helmet itself with the silver accenting the faceplate, and then very nice blue eyes for Bumblebee. It looks very, very cool. It's got this kind of neutral, maybe more gruffy look to him. Looks pretty cool. And then there's the notches in the helmet as well. So a little bit of detail going on. On the chest piece here, we obviously have the Autobot logo, which looks great. We do have the windows for the vehicle mode, obviously, for that piece. Moving down to the arms here, not much, there's a little bit line detail. The hands actually do have pretty cool kind of like a guard almost on his hands right there. Moving down to the legs, there's a little bit of molding in details which look pretty cool. Just gonna break up the gray, and then moving down we have the actual front end of the car. We got the the headlights there and the silver, which look nice, and then the actual bumper in this kind of grayish color. It looks pretty cool. Not gray, it's like a dark gray. It looks really good. I prefer this over the using a lighter gray, so I think they went well with that. And it's the good same kind of theme throughout. So you have like the dark gray legs, dark gray for the windows. Whether or not that's a good choice, at least it's consistent with the entire figure, and kind of gives this stealth look as well, which is pretty cool. Taking off the weapon here, we'll just take a look at the back before we jump into the weapon and then posability. With the weapon removed, you do have this kind of ugly little hole in the back of the vehicle, which you're not necessarily looking at the back all the time, but it is still there. We do have the headlights, and then the back of the bumper is also in that dark gray. Overall, the kibble is dealt with very nice, and it does have this very cool kind of rounded look for Bumblebee. It doesn't look out of place, and I do kind of really like what they did with that. So overall, a pretty great detailing for the figure. They could have gone maybe into a little bit more, or tried to at least match the colors a little bit better, but some nitpicks there. Now jumping into the actual blaster itself, he only does come with one accessory, and it is this little tiny blaster. It is molded in this kind of dark gray plastic that is prevalent throughout the figure, and then painted this very beautiful metallic silver, and it just kind of shines away, which looks really nice. On the other side of the blaster, you do have that little peg that will pop in the back of Bumblebee for the weapon storage, and then you have the black thing that will tap into his hand. The detail, overall the detail is pretty cool, and it is this kind of pistol design. You do have this little back piece here, then you have like this kind of rail thing. I assume that's where you could kind of put a attachment to, and then you actually have the blaster itself that protrudes from this kind of angled end, which looks really cool. So overall, pretty great accessory. I do like how small it is compared to Bumblebee. Makes sense for his character. I wouldn't expect anything massive, especially since he's so small. So overall, I think it's a great inclusion, and it does look pretty good on him. So really quickly, we'll jump into articulation. So with the head, it is on a kind of ball joint, so you can move all the way around 360. You can look up a little, that's about as high as you can look up. Then you can look down just a little bit like that. So up that high, down that low. So the arms are on a ball joint. I do say that it is kind of rough to see a full-on ball joint right there, but it is deluxe class, so I'll let that pass. There is a little tiny hole there for the arm, but you know, there's not much they could have done to actually close that up. For the articulation, you can have them go all the way 360, and as it's on a ball joint, you can go about that far out. You can kind of pop it out if you want to, but you do run the risk of it falling off like that. So that is up to you. Just pop it back in. For the elbow here, you can go to about just to 90 degree right there. That's kind of like a popping that you have to put it into, and then it goes, you know, straight out like so. The hand you can move 360. Doesn't open. It is deluxe class, so I didn't, you know, expect that. The waist you can move 360, and there is no kind of restriction for that. Now moving down to the legs. The legs here, we can kick forwards to about so far and kick back so far that way. You do run in a little bit into the back right there with the back of the, you know, front end there, but that's fine. The legs we can swivel just below the thigh all the way, oh, and it pops off. So a little bit of issues going on there. Not the greatest look right now, I will say. So something to keep an eye on. If you start to pop out things, that is not the greatest kind of quality. For the knee here, we can bend to 90 roughly. Again, you kind of restrict into some other things as you're bending. There is an ankle rocker that is located a little bit above the actual ankle, so you can see that in play. And then you can also have this cool little, you know, foot rocker almost. Just kind of rock it back a little bit, so you can have him as if he's running. You know, it's a cool little thing to do. So overall, not too bad for articulation, but for the actual, you know, popping of the joints, that is a little concerning over time, I could say. Now for the scoring for detail section and the posability section, as I did forget to actually put the detail score in the detail section. So for details, we are gonna say a solid, we'll say a 6. I think overall there could definitely be more detail put into this figure, especially coming to the actual paint matching, which would have been nice. Maybe more detail put into other parts. You do have a little bit of holes going on. You can kind of see the ball joints for the figure. And overall, there's just kind of a, you know, QC issue with some of the joints. Just overall, I think it comes at a solid 6 for detail. The weapon accessory does look great, but there is only one. And especially for such a small figure, I would have kind of hoped to see other things added to it. So for posability, I say we would be looking at probably, you know, a 7 out of 10. I think he's pretty great for articulation. Is everything you'd want out of the figure. You know, the head moves pretty good. The arms are on a ball joint, so they get great range of motion. He has these cool kind of rocking of the feet, especially he can do it side to side as well. And he does have a really great waist articulation too. So overall, I think a 7 is pretty solid for this figure. Now let's jump into transformation. Transformation is now complete, and I have to be very, very honest before we jump into the alt mode. I absolutely dislike the transformation. There's a lot that goes into it. It takes a already small figure and turns them even smaller, which I do appreciate, and it is overall pretty compact, and you know, it isn't like a shell format, it is like a full transformation. But I dislike a lot of the steps that go into this figure, especially some of the pieces, like the gray pieces on the feet. They feel like they're gonna break. I absolutely hate kind of moving those around. They feel kind of frail, and I'm worried that it is gonna pop off. And we do already see that with some of the, you know, hands and the legs, that they, you know, they tend to pop off. They're easy to put back together, but I don't know, I fear for kind of that piece in particular. And it's very reliant on panels. So the feet in particular are really kind of annoying to articulate into the body. It takes a long time to kind of put it all together, and you know, it's still not perfect. There's some panel gaps, which, you know, overall is fine. But to kind of get the front section into the actual connected into the center, the chest piece here, it is a nightmare. You know, you connect one piece and all of a sudden it pops something else out, so you kind of have to work away at it to kind of make sure it's as good as you can kind of get it, and then even is still not 100%, but you know, you don't want to spend any more time in it because it is kind of a simple transformation, although it's not. So overall, I dislike it for a couple different reasons. So I will be giving this probably a 5 out of 10, I would say. Maybe a 4 out of 10. Yeah, I say 4 out of 10 for the transformation for those reasons. Anyway, let's move on to the actual alt mode. So the alt mode itself, once you get it transform, I do really appreciate. It takes that really awesome you know, Volkswagen Beetle style car for Bumblebee, and you know, displays it really, really nicely. The wheels are super awesome and actually have the car go really, really nice to actually drive. You know, it takes very little movement to actually get them to move, so I really do appreciate that. It is kind of makes him a very fast car, just because of how small he is and with how great these wheels actually are. Looking into detail of the wheels, you have the actual black tire, which is more so a grayish color, similar to the bumper, with the silver, and then you actually have the pinned on wheel right there to actually add more silver. So pretty cool there. With the transformation, we actually do get another Autobot symbol, which kind of looks a little weird, I do have to say, with the Autobot symbol and then the Autobot symbol kind of right next to each other. He's kind of like a super fan almost. Something I did forget to mention in the robot mode is the actual, there's like this little pin that's in the foot right here, which now obviously is the front of the car. It is a little distracting and kind of breaks up the yellow, which is a little weird. Looking at the back, we can have the weapon, which I lost. Oh, here it is. The weapon pegged into that for weapon storage. A little bit weird in the actual alt mode to be carrying around a weapon, but you know, it's fine. There is storage, so I'm happy with that. You have the tail lights here. It actually connects the like the fender here to the tail light, so there's a little bit of yellow poking into that red. And then for the windscreens, they are all this kind of dark gray, which, you know, I wish maybe it wasn't this kind of dark gray. Again, it kind of adds, like I said earlier, a kind of stealth look to him, but it would have been nice maybe sort of a, you know, light blue like we had with that repack with some of the Autobots. They had the light blue windscreen pieces. I do appreciate that it isn't like a solid, that it's not the clear plastic, it is regular plastic, but you know, if it was, you know, a blue color like that light blue that we saw in that repack of Transformers, I would have, you know, more appreciated maybe something like that, but I think that comes down to personal opinion. Looking at the front of the vehicle, you can kind of see that split there. It doesn't fully go away, like I said. I have some problems with that. But you have the silver for the headlights, and then the blackish grayish bumper there, which looks pretty cool. So drawing some attention to some nitpicks. Again, like I mentioned, the chest piece compared to the rest of the body, it's pretty noticeable in alt mode, especially since, you know, the vehicle the vehicle mode combines an already small figure into a smaller form, so you can kind of see the different paneling colors going wrong. So you have like this mustard yellow at the top, which then breaks down to this other kind of yellow, which then breaks down to the body, which is a different kind of yellow. And then there's also this different yellow here, which is kind of not coming across on the camera, but it is a different yellow compared to the body, which is a different yellow compared to the top. So there's a lot of different identity crisis with the yellow going on. Looking at it from afar, it doesn't look too bad, but when you bring it up close, in hand, it does look pretty atrocious, I will say. So yeah, rollability is really nice. Just with the transformation coming together, I don't like some of the panel gapping, and then that yellow differentiating throughout is not the greatest look for it. So I think overall a 5 out of 10 for the alt mode is warranted for this figure. Jumping into value, this is a deluxe figure from Studio Series pre-Age of the Primes. So you have the stand that comes with the figure. You have the older style packaging. This did include the packaging that had the hole that you can actually put your hand through and touch the figure, and it resulting in some of your figures maybe having some defects. Like we see with the head on my figure, it actually has 2 different kind of defects on the head. So whether or not that was from people touching the figure or just from manufacturing, I'm not really sure, but something to mention. Again, the stand, it depends on if you actually will use it or not. I think it is nice to actually have the inclusion and have that choice. Whether or not you're going to use it or not, I think is a great idea. For a deluxe figure, I think he is definitely very small, but that can always be translated into other things like transformation or maybe accessories or kind of detail of the figure overall. So there's different things that could be put into. Now I think with Bumblebee here, he's a great representation of the 86 movie. I think overall I love the size of him, being super small, and kind of has him being like kind of an underdog. I love the addition of the silver blaster here, and it does look great. There's a lot of detail going on in it. The posability for the figure is pretty good as well. But there is nothing else. Like I wish maybe there was another accessory or maybe 2 more accessories. I wish maybe there was a better transformation or the overall feel of the figure. I wish I wouldn't be able to do that. For the price of the deluxe, I think when you compare it to someone like Air Raid, there's a lot more detail, plus he's bigger overall. There is no issues with paint details not matching up. You have 2 accessories. They are the same, but there are 2 of them at least, compared to the 1 of Bumblebee. The transformation is fun to do and not super hard. Now when we're looking at a jet form here, you have the jet form being maybe a little on the simple side with just the figure on the bottom, versus the Bumblebee where the actual figure, you can't really tell that it is a robot, so there is a caveat there. But I think overall the transformation to get to that point, and also the finished product as well, is maybe not as good as you would want it to be. So I think for the value of this figure, it's I love Bumblebee, don't get me wrong, I love the figure, but I think the value is not as great as it could be. It almost feels like this could have it almost feels like this could have been a larger core class figure. I don't know if that would have worked out quite as well to get a good figure like this, but just for kind of the amount of stuff that comes with him, being just the blaster, and a lot of different issues with him with the paint, it doesn't, I can't kind of justify that price, especially now if you want to buy him. I'm not sure how expensive he is now that he's been out for so long, but I think all these reasons together, I think warrants probably a 5 or 6 out of 10. We'll go probably a 6 out of 10 just because it's Bumblebee, but yes, not the greatest value. Now with each segment done, we'll jump into the final score and final thoughts of the figure. Now for final score with all 5 different attributes, the posability, the detail of the figure, the articulation, which I've already mentioned, the 5 sections being detail, posability / articulation, the transformation, the alt mode itself, and finally the overall value of the figure for the asking price. Altogether, it comes out to a 28 out of 50 points. Now that is just over the halfway. That is just over the halfway mark for for the 50 points. I do like this figure just because it is Bumblebee and there is some things going for it, but there is also a lot of things not going for it, with the paint detailing, some of the issues with the joints coming off, some of the issues with transforming. This piece here, I hate transforming this. Also forgot to mention actually like taking the back panel off, and this not little, but the attaching point that connects the head and the actual back panel is a pain too. That I feel like I am gonna snap, and I dislike that. I got the same feeling like transforming that particular piece as I did with the the legs of Megatronus. Transforming this joint here into the body, it terrifies me almost. I don't want to break the figure, and it's not like I don't know for sure if it'll break, but it has that feeling as if it's gonna snap. So that is definitely another point against it. So there's definitely a lot of things to go against it. Another thing I do want to point out is the head sculpt did have a couple of nicks into it, as well as the back headlights, or taillights, not headlights, had a little kind of scuff on it as well. Again, that could just be my copy. And again, like the size for him is very small. And I don't feel like that's translated well into the other aspects of the figure. It feels like they wanted to give a more complex transformation to him because of how small he is, but I don't feel like it translated very well, with some of the more, pieces feeling not as great, and the paneling not kind of completing itself very nicely. You kind of have to fix it, and then it breaks in a different part, and you kind of fix it again, and then it still doesn't give that full seamless look. So for these reasons, it comes out to a 28 out of 50. Still someone I would like to get, obviously, to complete the 86 movie cast, and I can't wait to kind of compare him with the Transformers Command Class Optimus Prime that I still have in box, and then as well as the 86 Megatron, which we had just recently gotten. So I am really excited to kind of compare them with some other figures from the movie. With that being said, that is the end of the review. If you did like the video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, while you're down there, if you can hit the subscribe button to stay in the loop for any more reviews that come out. Hopefully by next week I am better and not so under the weather, and I can look at the 86 Megatron. That one I'm really excited to actually look at, and then hopefully probably the week after we might look at the Optimus, but we'll see how that works out. I do kind of want to look at the more of the Constructicons as well to kind of build up the Devastator, so we'll see how it goes. But for now, that is it, and I'll see you next week. Thank you for watching.